There is a quote that has survived over 2,000 years. It comes from Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, Stoic philosopher, a man who faced war, plague, betrayal, and personal loss on a scale most of us will never comprehend. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Read that slowly. Let it settle. What stands in the way becomes the way. Ryan Holiday took that single idea and turned it into one of the most quietly powerful books of the last decade. The Obstacle is the Way is not a book about positive thinking. It's not about pretending difficulty doesn't exist or forcing a smile when life falls apart. It's not a book that asks you to be grateful for your pain before you've even had a chance to feel it. It's about something much harder and much more valuable than any of that. It's about learning to use what's in your way. Before we get into the lessons, understand what this book actually is. Holiday drew from the Stoic tradition, from Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, but he didn't write a history lesson. He wrote a practical manual. He filled it with stories of real people who faced real obstacles, entrepreneurs, athletes, generals, artists, prisoners of war, and showed how the ones who succeeded weren't the ones who avoided difficulty or got lucky enough to avoid suffering. They were the ones who stopped fighting their circumstances and started working with them. The book is built on 3 disciplines: perception, action, will. Each one builds on the last, and together they form a complete answer to the question every person eventually has to face. What do you do when life doesn't go the way you planned? The first discipline, perception. Before you can do anything about an obstacle, you have to see it clearly. Most people don't. Most people see obstacles through a fog of emotion, panic, frustration, resentment, fear. And that fog distorts everything. It makes problems look bigger and more permanent than they actually are. It makes you feel like a victim of your circumstances rather than someone capable of navigating them. It pulls you into reaction when what the moment actually requires is stillness. Holiday writes about the ancient practice of objectivity, of stripping away your emotional reaction to a situation and seeing it for exactly what it is. Not worse, not better, just what it is. The facts, clearly. The options, honestly. The reality. Without the story, you're layering on top of it. He tells the story of John D. Rockefeller, who at 19 years old experienced his first financial panic. Markets collapsed, banks failed, men around him lost everything and fell apart completely. And Rockefeller, young, inexperienced, with everything to lose, went calm. He walked through the chaos and watched. He studied it carefully. He asked questions. He paid attention to what others were too afraid to look at directly. While everyone else saw catastrophe, he saw a classroom. That panic taught him more about business, risk, and human behavior than any period of smooth sailing ever could have. And he never forgot the lesson. For the rest of his career, one of the most successful in American history, he welcomed turbulence. Not because he enjoyed pain, but because he had learned early that difficulty, seen clearly and without panic, is information. And information, in the right hands, is power. This is the first shift the book asks you to make. Stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this showing me? Stop treating every setback as an interruption to your life and start considering that it might be part of it. part of the education you didn't know you were enrolled in. The obstacle doesn't change, but the way you see it changes everything that comes after. The second discipline, action. Seeing the obstacle clearly is the beginning, but clarity without movement is just awareness. The second discipline is about what you do next and how you do it. Here, the book makes a point that cuts against almost everything modern culture tells us. We are taught to wait for the right moment, to wait until we feel ready, until the fear passes, until conditions improve, until we have more information, more resources, more confidence. We treat preparation as a virtue and action as something that comes after, once we're sure. Holiday's answer to all of that is simple. Move anyway. Not recklessly, not without thought, but persistently, deliberately, with the understanding that action, even imperfect, uncertain, incomplete action, is what creates new information, builds real momentum, and reveals the path forward one step at a time. Waiting rarely reveals anything. It mostly just gives fear more room to grow. He writes about Thomas Edison, who at 67 years old watched his entire laboratory burn to the ground. Years of irreplaceable work, notes, prototypes, experiments that could never be fully recreated, gone in a single night. His son found him standing in the glow of the flames, watching calmly. Edison turned to him and said, "Go get your mother and all her friends. They'll never see a fire like this again." The next morning, he began rebuilding, not because he wasn't affected, not because the loss didn't matter, but because he understood something most people spend their whole lives avoiding, that the fire had already happened. It was done, permanent, and no amount of grief, anger, or disbelief was going to unburn the laboratory. The only living question now was what came next. This is what Holiday calls creative action. It's the willingness to look honestly at what remains after the loss and after the failure, the rejection, the collapse, and ask, what can I work with here? Every closed door forces a reroute. Every failure contains a fragment of the next attempt, but only if you keep moving forward rather than standing still in what used to be. The third discipline, will. Perception helps you see clearly. Action moves you forward. But there are some things in life that cannot be solved, fixed, redirected, or improved, no matter how clearly you see them or how persistently you act. Some losses are permanent. Some circumstances cannot be changed. Some chapters of life are simply hard, and there is no clever reframe that makes them otherwise. For those moments, and they will come for all of us, Holiday offers a third discipline, will. Not willpower in the motivational sense, not forcing yourself through gritted teeth. Something older and steadier than that. The Stoics called it amor fati, the love of fate, the ability to accept fully, without bitterness, without resentment, whatever life places in front of you, not just tolerating it, not just enduring it, but meeting it with an open hand. Holiday writes about James Stockdale, a U.S. Navy pilot shot down over Vietnam and held as a prisoner of war for over 7 years. He was tortured repeatedly, isolated, humiliated. He had no way of knowing if he would ever be released or if anyone was even looking for him. He had no control over what was done to him, when it happened, or how long it would last. And yet, he survived, not just physically, but with his mind and his dignity completely intact, while others around him deteriorated and broke. His secret wasn't optimism. He was famously suspicious of optimists in the camp, men who kept saying they'd be home by Christmas, then Easter, then the following year. Each disappointment broke them a little more. Stockdale didn't comfort himself with timelines he couldn't guarantee. Instead, he made complete and absolute peace with uncertainty. He accepted that he did not know when this would end, and then he focused entirely on what he could control, how he treated the other prisoners, the values he refused to abandon, the inner standard he held himself to regardless of what surrounded him. That is will in its truest form, not the absence of pain, not the denial of hardship. The decision, quiet, deliberate, repeated every single day, about what that hardship means and who you will be inside of it. Holiday closes the book with a reminder that may be the most important of all. The obstacle is never the end of your story. It is always, always part of the path. Every great life you have ever admired was built through chapters that looked like failure from the inside. Every person who created something lasting had a season where the ground fell away completely and there was nothing left to hold on to. And then they kept going, not because they knew it would work out, not because they had certainty or comfort or a guarantee on the other side, but because continuing, showing up, moving forward, choosing to act rather than collapse, was the only honest response to being alive. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Whatever obstacle you're facing right now, in your work, your finances, your relationships, your own mind, it is not a detour from your path. It is not a sign that you chose wrong or that the odds are against you. It may be, if you're willing to look at it clearly, the most important part of the journey you're on. If this video gave you something to think about, the next one in this series goes even deeper into the wisdom that has quietly shaped some of the most resilient minds in history. We'll see you there.